All right, let's talk about our favorite dictator up north in Canada, Justin Trudeau, who is, I think, trying to rewrite history. And he's right now actively trying to gaslight all of us about.
We have breaking news now out of Ottawa. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, say they're separating after 18 years of marriage. CBC's Kate McKenna joins us now live from Ottawa. Kate, what more can you tell us?
Diane, both Justin Trudeau and Sophie Gregoire Trudeau posted identical statements on their Instagram just a few minutes ago. I'll read it now to you. It says, "Hi, everyone." On Justin's post, it says, "Sophie and I would like to share the fact that after many meaningful and difficult conversations, we have made the decision to separate. As always, we remain a close family with deep love and respect for each other and for everything we have built and will continue to build. For the well-being of our children, we ask that you respect their privacy and their privacy as well." So, of course, this is breaking news, as you mentioned. This is a couple that have been together since 2003. They met when they were co-hosting an event in Montreal, and they've been married for 18 years. So Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, very active during the Prime Minister's time in office, often seen side by side with him. Most recently at Canada Day, she was there, and we can think of the King's coronation as well. So she for sure has been a very active part of his time as Prime Minister. But, you know, this is not the first time a prime minister has announced his separation during his time in office. We can think of his father, now back in 1977. Back then, his father announced that he was separating from Justin Trudeau's mother, Margaret Trudeau. So there is some precedent for this, but it is definitely some breaking news here today.
Absolutely, yeah, coming as a shock, I'm sure, to many people. Sophie Gregoire, known for her very loving and emotional posts on social media, always so warm towards her family and husband. I'm sure there's a lot of buzz in the newsroom as well there, Kate.
Absolutely. I mean, this just happened. But to your point, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau really, in the last few years, has become known in her own right. I mean, she is a social activist. She's an advocate, particularly on issues like mental health. You know, this is news that all Canadians will definitely be paying attention to, because not only is he the Prime Minister, but she's also well known in a lot of circles.
Of course, you can't help but have your mind go forward to how this is going to be used politically, perhaps by the opposition. I don't know. What would you expect in that regard, Kate?
Well, one thing that I noticed in the statement from the Prime Minister is that he's asking for privacy. Whether or not that privacy will be given to him, I mean, I guess we'll see. But it is important to note that the couple do share 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. And the Prime Minister has written in the past and spoken publicly about how his parents' divorce hurt him when he was a child and how public that was. So those are definitely questions that we're going to continue watching as this unfurls a little bit more. But no question that it does change in some ways the political landscape of Canada.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kate. That's Kate McKenna in Ottawa.
Well, to Canada now, where the Trudeau government is pushing the LGBTQ plus LTY agenda in the nation's school system. If you're enrolling your children right now in preschool or kindergarten, you'll be told, hey, they won't be addressed as he or she. That's something the school systems are doing. Parents are being notified of this. They won't be given them biological pronouns. The kids will instead need to eventually decide what they will be called, despite what the parents want. Yes, this is happening in Canada. The most vocal critics of Trudeau's policies in Canada are coming largely from the Muslim population, telling Trudeau to keep your ideology away from our children. Protests have been erupting across Canada, and now Muslim activists are joining together with Christians in order to stage a 1 million-person march across Canada in September, calling on people of all faiths to come out and denounce this gender ideology in schools. David Creighton has been writing about this at the Post Millennial and joins us now. And David, you just had a really fascinating interview with the organizer of this 1 million-person march. This is Kamel El-Sheikh, who's organizing this, trying to bring together all faiths to march on the Trudeau government and say enough is enough. What did you find?
Well, I was fascinated because I looked up Kamel El-Sheikh after I discovered he was the motivator, the chief motivator behind all of these protests that we've been experiencing here in Ottawa. And they've been massive protests. And he has been coordinating with other Muslims across Canada, primarily in Calgary and in the Maritimes. So when he told me about this million-person march, I first thought, well, you know, that's optimistic, because a lot of people talk about these million-man or million-person marches. But when he told me the network he has created, that this isn't just going to be Ottawa, it's going to be from coast to coast, I think this is a realizable objective. And, you know, the question I first asked when Muslims started taking to the streets and literally had children were stomping on the gay pride flag, I said, this is a real conundrum for the Trudeau government and for Justin Trudeau, because he always talks about Islamophobia and he talks about transphobia. So which phobia is going to trump the other? Clearly, homophobia is trumping Islamophobia, and transphobia is trumping Islamophobia. But that's what happens when you have a country that is no longer subject just to the rule of law, but to identity politics.
So in your interview with El Sheikh, he was specifically talking about this agenda being foisted on children. And I think he even shared photographs with you showing some of these school pamphlets that are being handed out to children. Can you talk about that? What does it say?
Yeah, that's the first time I think we've publicly released some of this literature. And he sent me these screenshots that he had taken of the pamphlets that are being given to Muslim children. So it not only proves that the education system is targeting Muslim children, it shows that they're trying to demonstrate, which whatever means possible, that there's somehow a correlation between being a Muslim and being a member of the LGBT community. And clearly there is a contradiction there with the Quran, as there is with the Bible. And the Muslims are saying that stop pretending that this should all be self-evident to children, and stop indoctrinating our children into ideas and theology, really. This is ideology and theology that is contrary to basic Muslim beliefs. And I think it's interesting that the Muslims have finally had enough of this. And in this country, we've not seen the pushback from evangelical Christians and conservative Catholics over this. But I think the movement that Camille has begun here is going to bring a religious unity to Canada that we've never seen before. It's going to unite Protestants, evangelicals, Roman Catholics, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, all of which are beginning to say there's something wrong with children being forced to be indoctrinated into this ideology. And I think this is where this is going. I think it's going to be a beautiful outcome of unity amongst all faiths and races.
I would love that. I absolutely hope that Canada leads the charge on this. That would be amazing. One of the things that El Sheikh told you in your interview, he talked about the school system, and he was curious of why the Trudeau government is so obsessed with teaching sexuality to children and basically lying to these children, and not even focusing on education. They're more concerned with sort of handing out these sexualized pamphlets to children. Even handing out one pamphlet says, "Can I still be a Muslim if I'm queer?" And we've seen some of the horrible books that are being also put inside of Canadian schools as well, with the imagery, and it's shocking stuff.
Well, if this was a heterosexual movement pushing pornography in the schools, it would never have gotten off the ground. But somehow this is allowable if it's all under the banner of the LGBTQ plus movement. And some of the material that children are being exposed to is just so vile. And yet we don't seem to be able to teach children how to read or write or add. And the school system in Canada is as bad as I read about the school system in the United States, because they're so obsessed with teaching children how to masturbate and how to view sexually explicit materials that they've forgotten what the purpose of education is. And this is a tragedy. And it's a tragedy foremost for the children in Canada who are being denied a proper and basic education and being exposed to things that at one time you couldn't find on the street, but they're being digested in the classroom. And this really is a travesty. And thank God there's enough concerned parents out there who say we need to save our children and save their minds from this indoctrination.
What has Al-Sheikh, what has been his conversations with the Trudeau administration? Is the Trudeau administration concerned that they're going to see this 1 million person march across Canada denouncing their gender ideology pushing in schools?
They should be concerned, because there's a poll released last week, and I included this in my post-millennial article, that there's now a plurality of immigrants, of Canadians who were not born in this country, that are voting conservative. It's like 48% versus 38% that are voting liberal. Now, this is a complete transformation of the political process in Canada, where the Liberals, like the Democrats in the United States, always assumed if they brought in enough immigrants, they would get their votes. Not happening anymore. It's the immigrants, the new immigrants in Canada, who are saying, we came to Canada to get away from indoctrination, to get away from thought control, to get away from censorship. All of these things the Trudeau government is pushing on this country. So it's the new immigrants who are pushing back the hardest. So I think Trudeau has a lot to be worried about. And if this 1 million person march comes off, as I believe it will, I think that might be a wake-up call. But he cannot change. He cannot change his ideology because he is too much invested in it, and he will go down with that ship.
One of the big issues, of course, that they're fighting against is this idea that children could change their gender without telling their parents. Well, you can never change your gender, of course, but that they could go and receive some sort of surgery without telling their parents, or simply change their pronouns without telling their parents. And of course, Christian leaders and Muslim leaders in Canada are opposed to this. But the Muslim side of this has been much more outspoken. Have you been surprised? Maybe on the Christian side of this, you're starting to hear more and more vocal leadership speaking out against this, are you not?
We're beginning to, but it's taken far too long. Because if you consider the fact that 12-year-olds in this country, and any country that I'm aware of, they don't vote, they can't own firearms, they can't drink, they can't do a lot of things that adults can do. But however, they can decide to change their gender and literally change their sex. And this is absolutely outrageous. They can be chemically castrated without even telling their parents that this process is beginning. And this is outrageous. And if Christians aren't upset about this, if they haven't said, I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore, I don't know what's wrong with them, because it's time for parents to say, we're losing a generation of children to a liberal ideology that is toxic and that is literally destroying children's lives. You can't make decisions on your gender at 12 years old because it's so consequential. It is so long-term. And it's devastating, and we should not be allowing this to happen, at least without parental consent or knowledge. And this is the nanny state gone mad. We have Trudeau saying the state has a right to make these decisions on behalf of your children. The children don't need to talk to their parents, because as long as the teachers are aware of it, it's okay.
Unbelievable. It's really, it's stunning. It's like a world I don't even recognize anymore. My father passed away at 86 years old just a few short years ago. And I think, my gosh, if he were alive today, he wouldn't even recognize this world. It's really, really stunning. So good for, go ahead.
I say the same thing all the time. It's not the world or the country that I was even born in. And so much has changed so radically over the last three decades. It's alarming. But Canada is also the home of assisted suicide. So on the one hand, we're killing people because they're depressed. We're killing people because they just want to die. But we're destroying the younger generation at the same time. And it is a sad story. But the hopeful thing is that people are fighting back. And if it took the Muslims, and what's interesting is the left is adopting the same talking points that the far right used to use against the Muslims. They're saying every Muslim is a terrorist. Every Muslim wants jihad. Every Muslim wants Sharia law. They're using the same toxic talking points that were once reserved for the far right.